Hi everyone, we're from Group 1 and today we'll be presenting about our case study which is titled Unloading Chemical to IETS Plant. This video is made solely for learning purposes and it is not meant for any industrial practicing. Our group members are Ashraf, Yee Miao, Jing Ying and Win Lok. So, what is an IETS plant? IETS is actually the short for Industrial Effluent Treatment System, which refers to any facility including the effluent collection system designed and constructed for the purpose of reducing the potential of the industrial effluent or mixed effluent to cause pollution. And the industrial effluents means that any waste in the form of liquid or wastewater generated from the manufacturing process, including the treatment of water for water supply or any other activity occurring at any industrial premises.
So there are 5 typical steps in the process of conducting a high-rate assessment. Step number 1, we need to identify all work activities from a given project. For example, all of the activities that need to be done to finish the project. Step 2, list those work activities in the order the high-rate form prepared. For example, the first activity of a project is listed as number 1 in high-rate. Then another activity that follows the first activity is listed as number 2. And so on until all activity is listed. Step 3. Identify all possible hazards from the activity listed. Step 4. Conduct risk analysis by assess the hazard severity and consequences from the risk metric. For this step, we need to find and calculate how high is the levels of risk given from the hazard. My friend later will explain more details about this. Lastly, Step 5. Recommend control and safety measure for the hazard to eliminate or at least lower the effect of a hazard.
In this case study, the activities that are to be conducted is to unload chemicals manually from a 1-ton lorry to the IETS plant at a distance of 80 meters and to transport the chemicals using a device to the plant. And in this case study, we must consider the manholes, which are only covered with steel gratings and connected to the main storm drains. The following is a pictorial guide, which is an overview of your activity. So a 1-ton lorry will be carrying chemicals, which will be act as a monitoring kit and pH adjuster for the wastewater treatment plant. So this lorry is located at the unloading bay, and the chemicals in the lorry will be manually unloaded. So the chemicals, which is including 25 kilograms of calcium carbonate, 20 kilograms of urea, 50 test tubes of COD HACH HR and COD HACH HR+. Okay, the distance from this unloading bay to the IETS plant is 80 meters, and along the way, these chemicals will be going through manholes that are covered with steel gratings and connected to the main storm drains. So the device that will be used to transport these chemicals to the wastewater treatment plant is a forklift, and the chemicals will be carried to the IETS plant and stored at a chemical storage.
Here are some tables that we need to consider before we do the hierarchy form. Table A presents the likelihood of an event occurring, and Table B indicates the severity of the hazard. Risk can be calculated using the formula likelihood times severity. Next, the risk metric table and risk priority table. Table C shows the level of risk and Table D indicates the action required for each level of risk. This risk analysis uses likelihood and severity in a quantitative method. Presenting the result in a risk metric is a very effective way of communicating the distributions of a risk throughout a plant.
Here is an example of high-rate form. Work activity number 1. A lorry arrived at the unloading bay, which is 80 meters from the IETS plant. The possible hazards from the activities is chemical leakage or spillage during the transporting process. Exposure to urea vapor can cause respiratory tract irritations. Injecting urea can cause gastrointestinal irritations with nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Moreover, acute exposure to calcium carbonate dust can cause irritations of iris, runny nose, sneezing, coughing, and skin irritations are all consequences from hazards. There is existing risk control for the activity. For example, all of the chemicals are either sealed in the inner cardboard containers or plastic bags. The likelihood of a hazard is 2. The severity from a hazard is 2. Hence, the levels of risk is 2 multiplied by 2 equal to 4, which is low, given in the risk metric table. The recommended control measures for the hazards are: 1. Ensure to wear PPE/glove when handling and transporting the chemicals. 2. Decrease the distance between the unloading bay and the IETS plant. On-site unloading and storing is recommended. And 3. Transport chemical via lead truck rather than manually by legs.
So the second work activity is the chemicals are manually unloaded from a 1-ton lorry. The possible hazards is a leakage or spillage of the chemicals during the process, which can cause exposure to skin, eyes, and injuries towards the respiratory system. The existing risk control is the implement of safe work practice. So this hazard has a likelihood of 3, severity of 2, so resulting in a medium risk of 6. The recommended control measures include ensuring the concentration of chemical in the air is below PLE and TLV. Also, proper PPE is required during the unloading process. The next hazard is the major drop of object during the transferring at the manual unloading process. This can cause physical injuries such as fractures and strain, which may lead to fatals. So the existing risk control is to provide safety gears and training to employees, and this hazard has a likelihood of 2, severity of 5, and results in a medium risk of 10. The recommended control measures is to ensure the load is secure and balanced before the unloading and transferring process.
The third work activity is the manhole, which are only covered with the steel gratings. The first hazard identified is the rupture of a manhole, which can cause physical injury or bodily injury. The second hazard identified is spillage or leakage of chemical, which can cause chemical exposure or contaminations. The existing risk control for both hazards is implementing safe work practice. The risk for the first hazard is 6, which is considered as medium, and the second hazard is 4, which is considered as low risk. The recommended control measure for the first hazard is regular maintenance and checkings on the strength of a steel cover and wearing proper PPE. For the second hazard, the recommended control measures are providing training and safety awareness and wearing proper PPE.
The last work activity that is to be considered is the manholes which are connected to the main storm drains. So the hazard that is identified is the contamination of water. This will cause exposure to toxic vapor and injuries to the skin, eyes, intestinal tract, and respiratory system. So for the risk analysis, the existing risk control will be implementing safe work practice. Also, the likelihood and the severity is 2. Meanwhile, the risk is 4. This will fall in the green category. So for the risk control, the recommended measures is to make sure it is below the contamination limit by regularly checking the water contamination level.